Good morning. I'm going to try a new location here this morning since I have the stage for one more day and the font right in front of me. So I grew up in a little town in upstate New York, a place called Delmar, New York. And I went to the Bethlehem Central High School for most of my high school years. And Bethlehem Central is one of the few high schools in the United States that has high school fraternities. And it was a typical sort of 70s thing. We had the burnouts, and we had the jocks, and we had the goofballs, and they each had their fraternity. And the jock fraternity had invited me to join in, and I said no, but then the next week my best friend Jack agreed to do it, and in a kind of hallway in front of the locker conversation, I decided to go for it too. So the week prior, the week that I said yes, was a typical sort of doing stupid stuff in high school, a kind of hazing that probably is way out of sync with the way the world thinks nowadays. And then on the given Thursday night for the initiation, they came by, some guys came by my house, and I got in the back of the car, and while I was in the back of the car, they put this blindfold on me. And I remember they took great time to make sure I couldn't see out from underneath it or above it. It's a small town. They drove around, so I didn't know where I was going to end up, and it was in the basement of one of the other kids' houses, and stood anxiously in the street, in the driveway for a while, and then we were invited down into this basement, and the lights were off in the basement, and there was a skull, and there was a bunch of candles, and probably a Bible, I don't know, some book opened up in front of it, and the brothers all hovering around here, and I have no idea what transpired, but I'm sure I swore to all sorts of things. This was done in incredible solemnity and an incredible quiet, and then we came up and nobody spoke, and got in the back of a car and drove for quite a while. Again, I'm still blindfolded, and nobody is talking. And it is ominous. It is really, truly ominous. And we drove out of town, maybe 20 minutes out of town, and landed in a field far away from all houses. And in the field, the cars parked in a circle, as I later saw, and the headlights shining into the middle. And there I was initiated into this fraternity. And I don't know, I was not a part of a fraternity in college, so I don't know if fraternities still do this, but you can certainly remember, even if you were never a part of such a thing, about what a paddle is. A paddle is sort of like a sheared-off baseball bat. These paddles were either 2x4s with handles like baseball bats, or they were 2x6s with handles, made smooth like baseball bats, so that the brothers could hit you in the rear end. Now, the way this unfolded for me is some huge lineman took my torso and held me around the stomach like this, and some other defensive backs undoubtedly each grabbed one of my legs, and the brothers lined up in the circular light and started chanting secrecy and brotherhood, secrecy and brotherhood. And then they proceeded, one after another, to take a running start and to arrive in my backside and go, boom, as hard as they could. And I will just tell you that the pain of that, I'm 59 years old now, I can go back to that moment and I can still feel the first shot. The pain is extraordinary, and it just comes one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, and then you're 10, and then you're 20, and then you're 30, and it just keeps coming. And I made it to 36, and I can just tell you that somewhere around paddle number 3, I said, I quit. But they couldn't hear me, and I was too busy screaming at the top of my lungs. And when they released me, there was, they sort of surrounded me as though this was a good thing. And I was about to say, I quit, but I passed out. And I crumpled onto the ground and woke up later, sprawled across the hood of a car while my friend Jack was receiving actually a much milder treatment. After they saw that I passed out, they pulled the throttle back a little bit. So I came home that night, and it was about 10:15 on a Thursday night, and I grew up in a very small house, and walked in, and I had a very hard time walking. My right thigh had doubled in size. And I got to the top of the stairs, and my parents were both in bed reading. And some of you knew my mom when she used to live in town. My mom was reading a book, and I couldn't see her face when I got to the bedroom. And she lowered the book just enough for me to see her eyes. And there was a silence in the room, and she said to me, "You will never amount to anything if you do what everybody else wants you to do." And she raised the book. I was dismissed. Right? A serious come to Jesus moment. I walked down the hallway, and my dad followed me, and it was a small little house, only one bathroom on the second floor. And he shut the door, and he said to me, "You're going to be all right. And your mom's going to be all right too. She doesn't understand the things that boys do." And then he said, "I got to go get some scissors." And he had to cut my clothing off me because the blood had congealed everywhere. That evening stuck with me, both the come to Jesus moment and the mercy that my father showed. The phrase "come to Jesus," of course, means for many of us a very, very frank conversation about a very, very difficult truth, right? A come to Jesus moment. None of us are looking forward to those come to Jesus moments. There is, of course, a whole other come to Jesus moment, and the phrase "come to Jesus" rose up in the 1800s in the United States during one of the evangelical movements, a kind of come for conversion and come for devotion. Now today, we have the season of the Epiphany event on Sunday. I have no memory of that event actually landing on a Sunday during my time in the ministry. And the so-called wise men literally come to Jesus, right? They literally come to the truth. Now, we only hear in the scriptures that the wise men from the east. It's impossible for us to know exactly where in the east. There are two sort of theories out there. One is that these wise men have come from Persia, modern-day Iraq, because the word Magi has a root in a term that was used for Zoroastrian priests. And you may know a Zoroastrian. I know a Zoroastrian family when I used to be in Phoenix. Zoroastrians are the other ancient monotheistic religion, non-evangelical religion centered in modern-day Iraq. The other theory is that these wise men did not come from Persia around the Fertile Crescent, but they came this way on the Silk Route, right? On the Silk Road from east to west, and they were from India. India, that incredible hotbed of the mystical way. And the reason people think that is in great part because for the well-to-do in India, gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh were what one would give to a family after they'd had a birth. We only know that the wise men were astrologers of sorts. They found their religion in the skies, and they followed some cosmological zodiac. When the wise men arrive at the baby Jesus, they arrive at an epiphany, right? We use the word sometimes, an epiphany, for an insight. But epiphany is a theological word that means the manifestation of God in Christ. That's what the word epiphany means. And they arrive at that manifestation of God in Christ. And what do? Right? They arrive at the holy child Jesus, and they experience the holiness of the baby. Now, holiness? Holiness is the essence of God. That's what the holy is. It's the essence of God, and we are holy to the degree that we have that divine essence within us, right? And Jesus, as the Son of God, the manifestation of that essence, has it. It's God-given. And sometimes when you look at paintings of this scene with the so-called wise men, we have three, right? But there doesn't say three in the Bible. That the wise men arrive, and Jesus has a halo. For those of you who are in touch with the East, you understand that in the East they understand chakras, right? Energy centers within the body, and the seventh chakra is the crown chakra. You sometimes see adaptations of the Buddha with something on the Buddha's head. That is symbolizing the crown chakra, and the crown chakra is the energy center for our spirituality, our connection to the divinity. And so we would say that in the child Jesus, there is complete communion between Jesus, the baby, and the divine. This is, those of you who were present for my Christmas sermon, this was the umbilical cord that I was talking about in the icon. And so they come to the child Jesus, experience his holiness, and what do? They pay him homage. They get very low, right? Homage is a disposition of the heart that results in the changing position of the body, right? You get your head down, you get low. And any of you know the truth of this, that anytime you have come in touch with the holy, your first reaction is get down, get low. Remember in Isaiah, the call of Isaiah, when he raises up into the presence of God, and he says, I'm a nobody and I live amongst nobodies. Right? It's a loose translation. Very small, very low. And they get very low. And then what do? They give him the gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And then they have a moment of truth where in a dream it says, don't go back and talk to Herod. Herod has made the mistake thinking that the king is a political king, not the king of the kingdom of heaven. So, this font, this morning, is a come to Jesus moment for 5 kids. Most all of us have had our come to Jesus moment in the font, and sometimes some of us were present to it, conscious and can remember it, but most of us don't remember the come to Jesus moment, right? We don't. But what are these kids being baptized into, and what were you baptized into in that come to Jesus moment? Well, you're baptized not into a moment, but you're baptized into a life which is a come to Jesus life. We spend our whole lives, starting here, coming to Jesus. It just never stops. You just keep coming. You keep coming. And if we stay with it long enough, if we stay with Jesus, we keep coming to Jesus, we too will be touched by Jesus' holiness. We will be touched by that numinous thing of grace that is God. And then we, like the 3 wise men, will get low. If you ever felt a disposition of the heart to get very low because you've been near the holy, you know this. And it is both a very low moment and a very filling moment. The lower you go, the higher your spirit soars. This is the 7th chapter of St. Benedict's rule, the inverted ladder of humility. The lower you go, the higher we rise with God. And when you get in touch with the holiness of Jesus, you have the desire to give. It is just what happens. It just is what happens. And you wonder why people give away their lives or seemingly give away their lives. It's because they've been touched by the holy. I mean, these guys, the wise men, give gold and they give frankincense and myrrh. But what do we give? We give our time. We give our talent. We give our treasure. We give because we are touched by that which is, right? We're touched by being. And when that being touches our human beingness, the desire to give your mind and your body and your soul away to it has that great irony. The more you give, the more you get, right? This is Jesus's take up your cross and follow me. The one who seeks to save his life will lose it, and the one who loses his life for my sake will gain it. It's all inverted. It's all upside down. And it starts with a moment. And so in a little bit when we baptize these kids, let's all join in and make their moment a moment that will cast their lives and our lives on a path where we just want to come to Jesus.